My next guest is Carly Spina. Carly has 15 years of experience in multilingual education, including her service as an EL teacher, third grade bilingual classroom teacher, and a district wide multilingual instructional coach. She is currently a multilingual education specialist at the Illinois Resource Center, providing professional learning opportunities and technical assistance support to educators and leaders across the state and beyond. Spina enjoys connecting with other educators and leaders across the country and beyond, and is an active member of the multilingual education professional learning community. Her first book, Moving Beyond for Multilingual Learners, was published in November of 2021 by EduMatch Publishing and is available on Amazon. Welcome to the podcast, Carly.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I've been following your work for a while, and I know that you do some blogging as well for Teach Better Team. Let's start off with the question I ask everybody at the beginning of the podcast. Tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
So I think the biggest moment that comes to my mind when I was thinking on this question is, when we call ourselves advocates for those we serve, whether we're thinking of students or families, when we hold on to that idea, that role of being an advocate, oftentimes we pour ourselves into things at 150% of our capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And while it's a good thing to advocate, we also have to do that within boundaries. And there was a period in my life where I was overextending myself into my work, and I really left little to my family, my own kids, my financial, situation, and even my mental capacity. And so I found myself really hitting like kind of a rock bottom in every category. And I had pulled money out of my wallet during the day because I had been dealing with a situation at work where our lunchroom staff was really adamant about not financially supporting particular families who were going through hardships. And I didn't want to deal with the politics of, escalating anything. And so I took money out of my wallet and I gave it to this family that was struggling with something pretty catastrophic. And then went to tutoring, went to a parent education program that we had launched. And my son, I didn't have money to feed him dinner. And this led me to like sitting outside of a McDonald's parking lot under a streetlight, counting out change that I was trying to find in the back seat. And it was really a moment for me of like, again, just rock bottom for a whole lot of different things, but I had to really kind of pull back and scale back and say, hey, Carly, you can still advocate. You can still do, as much as you can, but you also need to pause and, take stock of like what's realistic, what's within your capacity and what's not. And how can you ask for help? So I got much better about asking for help. I still need reminders, but I think that is a story that will always humble me a little bit and say, hey, Carly, do what's within reason for you.
Yeah, I think as educators, we're always wanting to serve our students and their families. And like you said, sometimes that can go over our own needs or our own family needs. And it's finding that fine balance.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we all need those reminders too, especially if we find ourselves like, well, if I don't do this, no one else will. Like, no, ask for a team. There's a team there somewhere that will help you do all these things.
Yeah. So you've been blogging for the Teach Better team about as long as I have, since late 2020. And I see most of your blog posts are in the term of the multilingual English language learner space. So talk to me a little bit about some of these blog posts and what you hope I would say general educators / administrators will get out of this.
Yeah, so I'm so excited to be connected to the whole Teach Better network. And when I first started to blog, I really wanted to draw on my experiences serving multilingual learners, but I recognize the Teach Better community, right? we stretch across multiple
Mhm.
countries, and we all teach different populations. So I think what's one cool thing is that the multilingual community, that's like the fastest growing community in the US for in US schools. And so whether we currently have multilingual students or we're going to receive multilingual students, I think one of my biggest hopes and passions is really looking at nurturing a mindset that is inclusive to our students and families. I think many times folks will say, like, well, I don't have that on my certificate. Like, I don't
Mhm.
have an EL endorsement. So I'm not really sure what to do. Or like, I don't have, tools or resources to, feel equipped as a professional. So I hope that, my posts can kind of springboard some discussion and again really nurture an inclusive mindset. I think many times in our schools are like we have a lot of language that floats around in the
Yeah.
hallways about particular students, and so sometimes people will say like, oh, that student has no English, and I'm like,
Mhm.
well, maybe they currently don't have like literacy skills in English, for example, but they have a whole lot of language skills in
Yeah.
Vietnamese and in English, and they're starting their English language journey. So looking at our students through an asset-based lens.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that's kind of what a lot of districts are focusing on now is like not looking at the deficiencies, but looking at what they already know. Like they are fluent in another language that, most people born in the US are not, right? And
Yes.
sometimes they've learned in their home country a second language that may not be English. I think
Yes.
that'll be an asset if they've already learned a second language to help them learn that third language or fourth language. And think it's yeah, focusing on their literacy skills in their home language can really go a long way. Wanted to talk to you also about your book, Moving Beyond for Multilingual Learners. You talk about it's a little bit about of everything, and there's chapters on SEL, community engagement. So give me a little bit of information about what readers could find.
Yes, yes. So in the book, I was originally going to call the book Moving Beyond Visuals because as an EL teacher and as a third grade bilingual teacher, anytime I went to workshops and conferences, I felt like I was always hungry for more to, equip myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like the fields like always had a band-aid approach to everything. And the biggest band-aid was just like add a visual. And that
Yeah.
is just like the the one strategy or tool that will really reach all learners. So over the years, I said, okay, Carly, you've got to really push beyond just adding a visual. What else is going to really make an impact for the kids in front of you? And how are you going to help them navigate
Mm-hmm.
grade level content while they're learning content and language simultaneously? Like, what are you going to do, Carly?
Yeah.
um, and so as I sit down to write, I started to really collect all of these different, the facets of all the work that we all do, like how do we serve the families? How do we connect with different community agencies? And so as I started to write, I started to identify different ways, different moments for us to move beyond. Again, that could be like practices we've inherited. I have, yeah, just a lot of different, thoughts and ideas. I'm drawing on my own experiences and things that I have learned from colleagues over the years. So every chapter starts with moving beyond something. So I have a
Mm-hmm.
chapter on family engagement, and that one is called Moving Beyond the Newsletter.
Okay.
I have a chapter on SEL for multilingual learners, and that one is called Beyond Inspiration. So I'm trying to kind of collect all those things and push readers just like I'm pushing myself to
Mhm,
move beyond and stretch beyond, all those things, and just be a little bit better every day.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, because I think there's been books on supporting multilingual learners for years, but I think a lot of the time it's those teachers who have the students in their classrooms that gravitate towards those books, or if they're getting the endorsement. But really, any staff member in a school, because as you said, there's more and more coming in now post pandemic, and also the fact that we want to be able to support and focus on what they know, how we can help new families navigate the need to knows of the community as well. So,
Yes,
highly
yes.
suggest picking up that book.
Thank you.
So you've worked in many different roles, as I mentioned in the bio. Your role currently is a multilingual education specialist at the Illinois Resource Center. So, um, kind of what does that role entail, and do you get into districts or schools very much now?
Yes, yes. So this was always like a dream job of mine
Mhm,
because when I was teaching, I would always attend workshops and attend there's this great annual statewide conference
mhm,
for educators who serve multilingual learners. So I always said like, oh, the IRC, the Illinois Resource Center, like that is always the go-to place for research and for
mhm,
recommendations and guidance and all these things. And so I'm honestly every day I wake up so honored and thrilled because all of my colleagues are just these brilliant, brilliant women
mhm,
who I have followed their work for years. But it's the coolest job ever, really. Every day is a little bit different, but we have a contract with the Illinois State Board of Education, and so
okay,
we provide like webinars like all the time, like free webinars for Illinois teachers. Illinois teachers get priority,
mhm,
but if there are spots available, other people can absolutely sign up and join us. But we offer workshops on all kinds of different topics related to serving students and families. And then the other piece of the job is I get to go into schools and districts, and it's just the greatest. I get to meet with really incredible teachers who are stretching their practice, who are doing cool, great things
mhm,
for their
mhm,
kids and for families. And I learned so much from all of them. So I'm working with a few different districts right now on co-teaching for multilingual learners. So really cool because we get to kind of pull on the work of some of my education heroes like Dr. Andrea Honigspeld and Maria G. Dev. They've done
mhm,
extensive work on co-teaching. But it's really neat. There's professional learning, there's coaching, there's all kinds of different things that kind of fall under the umbrella. And then so yeah, it's a lot of research is involved, which is exciting because I love digging into, professional pieces, and I love to read research and studies and things like that. So it's really a really cool job, and I couldn't be more excited.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, definitely that pinnacle of where you kind of saw those people when you started out teaching, right? You kind of achieved that and really are able to make that huge difference statewide. So congratulations on landing that position and having that impact with students. But you also give some professional development. You can consult with districts in person or via web. So, what is some PD that you do consult with districts on? What are some of those themes?
So a lot of like popular, like more hot topics right now that I'm working with districts on include things like looking at our MTSS structures in
Okay.
schools and districts and making sure that those structures are linguistically and culturally responsive to our communities. We look at things like what data pieces are being collected, what's not being collected and why. And then looking at things even like interventions, and are those linguistically appropriate? Are those being provided by somebody who has, some professional experience serving multilingual learners? Because I think many of our schools are still kind of functioning through this, like we're trying to cram a multilingual framework into a monolingual system, and it really
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work. We really do have to utilize different data sets and ask different questions and
Mm-hmm.
kind of be guided through a different lens. So that's definitely one big topic. Another big topic is this idea, and it's another acronym in education because we love those. LTEL is LTEL, or long-term English learner.
Mm-hmm.
And each state has a slightly different definition, but it's really talking about students who have been within an EL program or bilingual or dual language program for 5 or more years. Some
Mm-hmm.
schools or some states say 6 or more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but looking at language growth for students who many of which were born in the United States, and who have been in English instructional programs for years and years, looking at how we can kind of boost and elevate and amplify language learning opportunities for higher proficiency levels. So those are kind of some of the bigger topics. But again, we kind of take feedback on what schools have identified also as, needs of areas, that things that they want to explore or push themselves a little deeper in. So we kind of go down a whole lot of different routes. But I think those are probably two of the biggest needs that I am seeing.
Yeah, I'm interested in kind of knowing more about that LTEL and how those students, because I know some of them stay in program for a while. They are unable to maybe score high enough on the access test, or they're kind of stagnant in their language learning. What do you see kind of as trends in like getting those kids to kind of move through so they might not need these services?
It's interesting because we always talk about, planning our instruction through the 4 domains of language: reading,
Mm-hmm.
writing, listening, and speaking. And
Mm-hmm.
we see for students as they grow in their age and they, grow
Mm-hmm.
into, different grade levels, they often have less and less opportunity to speak about grade level content. There was a study done, I want to say in 2016, and it was Nystrand, I believe, was the researcher, and
Okay.
he gathered that on average, like if you look at a secondary classroom, like a high school block of instruction for like a 60-minute period, he said the average was between 14 and 52 seconds for
Okay.
students to speak about grade level content, like
Wow.
within for every 1 hour. So if you look across the span of a day, that's like maybe 8 minutes
Yeah.
max for kids. And so we want to make sure we're amplifying linguistic opportunities to talk about the content, talk about their biology, talk
Yeah.
about their, ELA content learning. But we really want to make sure that we're providing reading, writing, listening, and speaking opportunities for every block of period, every period of instructional time that we have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's something I think there are teachers that need to work a little bit more on less teacher talk, right?
Yes,
Students are going to
yes.
be writing, they do a lot of writing, I think, but just that opportunity for students to speak, right? And
Yes, yes.
not just be passive listeners or writers. So that's, I think there's a lot of opportunities to kind of give the time to the students to reflect. Yeah. So
Yes, yes.
really enjoyed our conversation about supporting multilingual learners, their families, your book, and the trench story that you shared. Out of everything we talked about on the podcast, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
I'd love for everyone to know that every single person has their own unique language journey. Like all of us have our own language journey. We have things that even if we have a monolingual language journey, we
Mm-hmm.
are always reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And we have had moments that have influenced each part of those journeys
Mm-hmm.
for us. So all of our students also have those language journeys. So it's sometimes hard when we say like, oh, we're trying to like identify a like peer, for example, or like, oh, well, students typically at this proficiency level do this. Well, it's really hard to quantify. So,
Yeah.
I think as we are all languagers, we are all people who teach content through language. Looking for opportunities to enhance our own language journeys and positively influence the language journeys of every student that we serve. I think that's everyone's responsibility, no matter what our role is in the school, because we're all utilizing language to teach our content.
So important. Whether or not you speak a different language or have that experience in a different country, you can connect through that language, through your how you use language and how you process language. So
Yes, yes.
great thoughts there. How can people find you online and connect with you?
So I'm probably most active on Twitter, so you can find me at Mrs. Spina's class, or you can email me anytime at carlymspina@gmail.com.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for being on the Out of the Trenches podcast today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.